Hey, welcome everybody to the Real Talk Mormonism number 16. It's September 12th, 2024. It's great to have you on board. This is a call-in show. If you follow the link there at StreamYard.com, you can join your humble host on this program. And I am D-Baze, the host of the Mormon News Roundup, the Mormon movie reviews, and Real Talk Mormonism. And yes, folks, that is talent on loan from Kolob. This program is designed to discuss all things Mormonism. Whether you're interested in church history, theology, or current events, this show is your platform. We welcome both critics and defenders of the faith to join the conversation. This is your time to shine. I'd like to welcome, nice to see you in the chat there, Culture Hall, Alan, and Real Life. Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Now, whether you don't know the first thing about the church or you're currently on the Strengthening Church Members Committee, this is your time to call in. No dumb questions. Nothing is off limits. You can stump the chump. I welcome the haters. No holds barred. Outsmart the know-it-alls. No scripts, no rules. Except, of course, the YouTube terms of service. Simply follow the StreamYard link to participate live and share your thoughts, questions, or anything that is LDS related. Engage in lively discussions. This is your place to shine. So in lieu of somebody not showing up, there's just a couple of things that I do want to go over without people calling in. I'm not going to have as much to go on this time, that's for sure. But let's see what we got here, what I've got queued up for sure. First of all, how do you like my thumbnail? I think it's pretty good. That's not too bad there. Kind of imagine myself in, maybe what is that, Greece? I have a Vespa, by the way. Hey, Liz, welcome to the program. Great to see you. I also just want to let everybody know that I did buy a green screen background for myself. I finally just bit the bullet and bought it today. And if you look at my background here, I am Brigham Young and reckless. Get it? I always have a joke that goes along with these monikers. And why these guys are crying, I don't really know. I just picked a AI thumbnail. What can I tell you? But as far as, like I said, we've got this green screen, and that's going to allow me to do a couple of unique things. I've got a couple of things on board here. I want to transition from StreamYard because StreamYard is a really, really good platform. It's super intuitive. It's very user-friendly, and it's kind of like a Chevy Malibu. It's a decent car. It'll get you from point A to point B. But as far as some of the things that I really want to do, I really need to transition to a better streaming platform, and that is OBS. And I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on getting my knowledge on OBS up to date. It's very complicated. It is extremely technical. I've watched a lot of videos on it, but I want to eventually get off of StreamYard and do something that is a little bit more robust, and that green screen will be the first step in that. Now, we just got off of, let's see here. I restream. Yeah, Rio for life. I like Restream and OBS. Yeah, OBS is absolutely the boss. It's, that's the problem. It's very difficult here. Now, I just watched the Elder Oaks calls for more excommunications here on Radio Free Mormon. He said he didn't really understand this slide. Perhaps I can offer some humble advice here, because this is the stake presidents supposedly asking for more membership councils for members out there. And this was a leaked presentation. Elder Oaks, according to this presentation, said in recent years, we have had a significant decline in membership councils worldwide. When membership councils are held, the proportion of membership restrictions, especially withdrawal of membership, has also declined significantly. So what I'm hearing from this, it seems pretty obvious to me that the total number of membership councils is declining. I think that anecdotally we can confirm that, and that when there is a membership council, that you're less likely to impose either membership restrictions, which used to be called disfellowshipment, or complete membership withdrawal. So there's less memberships, and the punishments or the restrictions on them are less severe. It seems rather, I don't know, it seems obvious to me. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Now, this probably, again, without people calling in, this is probably not going to be the most amazing show, but I'm going to attempt during this 1 hour presentation here, I'm going to try to put together the entire show for the Mormon News Roundup here on screen while we're doing it in live time. So I'll show you the process that goes behind this. So this is a shared document that I'm currently sharing with those of you who are with me. You'll see that I have, I'm sharing it always with Rebecca Biblioteca over at Mormonish Podcast. She's on there a couple of different times. And then I'm also sharing it with Generally Unquotable, because I've got Megan who's coming onto the program. So we're currently collaborating on this particular document here. Hey, Peter, welcome to the program. Not sure how interested everybody will be in this, but this is the behind the scenes of the Mormon News Roundup. So this episode, this is the show documents. We always have these in here. Episode 131 coming up. What's your 1 minute Mormon stories? Now, here's the articles that we are going to be collaborating on it. I'm going to show you how to make a show, or at least what I do to make a show out of this entire thing. So the first here is the church begins preliminary construction on the temple. So I use the snipping tool here to come in and I grab this material here, and then I take it, and we're going to make a blank presentation. This is exactly how I would make a show here. And we're going to have right over here, we're going to paste that onto, actually, it's going to be the third one here. I'm going to see if this, I don't know how entertaining this will be for you, but we're going to copy our information in from this over here. Oh, Doug Vincent, Doug,
for you,
what's up? What's up, Doug? How you doing?
Hey, man. From this over here.
Good. You got to turn the mute off on your. You got to mute your actual.
From this over here. You got to turn the mute off on your.
Yeah, you got to turn the mute off. Otherwise, we're going to get a lot of reverb. So let's see if we got.
You got to turn the mute off on your.
Yeah, no, I can still hear it. Wait a minute. I think it's gone. Go ahead and say something.
Right.
How's it going?
Fine, man.
What Mormon item is on your mind?
I didn't want you to feel lonely out there.
Okay. Well, what Mormon item do you want to discuss, my friend? What LDS related stuff is on your mind?
I think RFM's recent podcast just a few minutes ago was kind of eye-opening, and especially this seminar or whatever that Oaks had, where he called for more excommunications, more membership councils anyway, which also will lead to more more excommunications. Hang on, let me turn down some lights here just a second.
Yeah, and actually, I was just talking about that with somebody. We've definitely seen, as the presentation shows, a decline in membership councils, at least from my perspective, over the last couple of years. But it does seem like Oaks is a person who would probably be willing to ramp those up. And if this is under his direction, and if he's trying to push that through, then I imagine we'll see more restrictions, because he is much more of a hardliner. I mean, President Nelson is a hardliner, but there's no doubt about it that Oaks is even much more of a hardliner than he is. And of course, with the membership restrictions that are going into the transgender members that just happened a couple of weeks ago, I think what we're seeing is maybe a slight power vacuum of maybe this is the impetus behind Oaks as well. I think he's flexing his, as the prophet in waiting. That's just the way that I see this.
I think you're right. I think there's some passing of the baton, maybe a little bit going on. So, yeah. I mean, the question, Nelson knows he's not going to be here too much longer, so.
He seemed to be in pretty decent health at his birthday party. I mean, obviously he wasn't doing that much, and his abilities are limited, as you would expect from anyone who's 100 years old. But his ability to influence the church, I think, is diminished in the last. I think it's demonstrable in the last probably 18 months, ever since he did the AI generated, the deep fake general conference where he mailed it in. It really started. Right. Was that 3 general conferences ago, which is when he pre-recorded it in the conference center. He was there in the conference center, but he pre-recorded it. And then the next one, he pre-recorded it, but it wasn't in the conference center. And then this last time, I mean, he wasn't even at all of the sessions. So we're seeing his ability to influence the church, I think, somewhat diminished.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, Oaks's agenda is starting to show. So
yeah, with these transgender membership restrictions, with the ramping up of the more membership withdrawals. And of course, the big question is who is next on the chopping block here? We heard from that broadcast that Landon Brophy might have excommunication. What about, obviously, the biggest target out there is Radio Free Mormon? Do you think that they're going to come for him?
Wouldn't be surprised. They may be making a clean sweep of the podcasters. Who knows?
Yeah, and I do wonder, my podcast is just too small, I think, to have any really worries about that. I'm not currently worried about it, but the thing about Bishop Roulette and Stake President Roulette is that it's just a matter of time, because that chamber is going to be fired every couple of years. And sometimes you got a good stake president, sometimes you got a good bishop, or good on good, whatever, quote unquote good, or we'll just call it a chill bishop, chill stake president. But eventually, no one can survive Russian roulette forever. You're going to get a stake president. You're going to get an area president. You're going to get somebody who just wants to, quote unquote, root things out. And so far, RFM, you can go back and listen to his podcast where he had a member of his stake presidency on his podcast. I believe it was either the first or the second counselor. And they said, we're just fine with RFM. But what happens when that changes over? What happens when there's a new area authority? And will this particular leaked document, has that actually influencing people? What do you think, Doug?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think the wheels were in motion long before this. I don't think this is something that just happened yesterday. I think that there's been a shift in the church towards a little more fundamentalism, and part of the fundamentalism, if you have listened to any of the podcasts from the psychological experts that talk about, how organizations control people, whenever the fundamentalists get in control, you're going to see a lot more of this policing of behavior going on. And I think that we're going to see more of it. I think we see, in people like David Bednar also, the same kind of sentiments. And we know that he's going to be prophet at some point, unless something happens to him. But he's almost guaranteed to have a long tenure as president of the church. So I think just long term, if you're trying to predict what's the mood going to be like in the church, what's the sort of the zeitgeist going to feel like, I think it's going to feel a lot more fundamental.
Yeah, really, everyone really needs to, and I think that David Bednar's influence is very much outsized from his normal position in the apostleship, and that's because everybody realizes that he will be a generational prophet, barring some kind of a catastrophe. And I mean, you have President Oaks is next up, and then you have Holland, who has been in extremely poor health. He was in a coma for 5 weeks. And he doesn't look good in the pictures, quite frankly. Whereas Oaks looks pretty decent. Okay, and then we have Uchtdorf as well, but all of those people are 90. I think Uchtdorf is late 80s, but the rest of those guys are all 90 plus. And Eyring, he was in the presiding bishopric and he was called over, so he actually doesn't have that kind of a senior tenure. He was in the presiding bishopric all the way up until, I believe, the early 1990s, and then he was called over to the apostleship. So Bednar is 70, I believe he's 71, maybe 72 years old, and he looks like he is in exceptionally good health. Yeah. Okay, so there's just no way that these guys are going to live more than about 10 years. So Bednar, within 10 years time frame, it's an actuarial table. He's gonna take the reins, barring any kind of catastrophe. And all of the rest of these people understand that, which is why I think that they kind of look to him, knowing that he's going to be next up or in the near future, more than they would just a regular average apostle. That's my opinion.
I think you're right. I think people know. And so I think that probably assignments are given to him to kind of help prepare him. If people we're not the only people that can read those actuarial tables, and figure out who's kind of going to line up. So I think they're grooming him for that role.
Yeah, Lisa says, if leadership up top comes after you, it doesn't matter what about the bishop or the stake president. And that's generally true. That's usually the case. But you can't excommunicate somebody without the stake president and the bishop. If they don't convene the council, you can release them and call someone who will. But we've seen times where people have had pressure from up top, and they've said that they either wouldn't do something or that they would. Bishops and stake presidents can make their own decisions. Obviously, they're yes men. I mean, 90% of bishops, maybe even 95%, are just going to do what they're told. But you will have some people who say, you know what, you want me to do this and I'm not going to do it, and you're going to have to release me. And will they do that? I don't know. It's hard to say. And
it's really hard to say. We do have historical precedents for them replacing the stake president. They did that with let's see, one of the September 6th, I believe. I can't remember which one. Yeah, that they refused to go through with it, and I think it was Paul Toscano, and they refused to do it, and so they released that stake president. I may be remembering that wrong, but somebody correct me in the audience if I'm wrong. But I know that that's happened before. So we know that the top guys, the 12 apostles, have been directly involved in certain excommunications. So even though they say that they don't, we know that that's not true, that they do.
Yeah, we know, for instance, that Boyd Packer was very intimately connected with that September 6th in particular. And that's really goes back to what he said were the three great dangers of the church were the feminists, the intellectuals, and what he called the homosexuals. And so he was putting his thumb on the scale of those individuals in the September 6th. And as people like Patrick Mason have said, that basically robbed the church. It put a chill over the church, especially when it came to church history. Think about the early 1990s. The church didn't deal any form honestly with its history for another 20 years. There was a generation of people who are either excommunicated or refused to publish anything that could be considered critical to the church because they were worried that they would be excommunicated. So it was an entire lost generation. In fact, Patrick Mason himself, on one of his episodes, the famous Mormon scholar, said that he wouldn't have gotten to where he was because he said that he wasn't such a great scholar at the time to become the head of the Claremont Mormon, graduate studies program. And the reason that he got that was because of Boyd K. Packer and the silencing of all those critics. They did a fundamental disservice to the history of the church. It's not just about the hiding of the church history, which we know they've engaged in. It's not just about the faith promoting narrative. It's about the silencing of anybody who could potentially be a critic, and then the actual silencing of the September 6th in general. I mean, the church had a masterful way of trying to control the narrative, and until the internet came out, if there hadn't been for the internet, they'd still be doing it today.
Yeah, and let's see, David O. McKay, the David O. McKay book by Greg Prince. Some of the shenanigans that went on during his presidency were really eye-opening, and you saw multiple apostles petition the president of the church to force out people, to have courts on them. Sterling McMurrin, people like that. And that's the one. Everybody should read that book. The reason this is such a gem is an unvarnished look at a presidency and kind of pulls the curtain back to some of the behind the scenes, not all, but some of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. And the reason that Greg Prince was able to do that is because he wound up being given exclusive access to David O. McKay's secretary, her documents. She had saved all the documents from David O. McKay's tenure, like pallets of them. And Greg Prince got access to that, and it had all of these notes, these personal correspondences, memos back and forth between apostles and the president of the church, all kinds of really interesting and intimate documents that you normally would never see. And you saw this behind the scenes maneuvering, the political stuff, the sniping at people like Paul Toscano and the September 6th, people like Sterling McMurrin that were not looked on favorably by some of the brethren. And, there's a lot of politics involved in this, and just the whims of the brethren, who they like and who they don't like. So I would encourage everybody to read that one. I found it extremely enlightening.
Well, I mean, Greg Prince was one of the first people that got that behind the scenes access that showed that the brethren are not in unanimity, and they'd hidden it so well for so long. And that's also been flushed out a great deal by Matt Harris's new book, Second Class Saints. And we're seeing a significant amount of disunity among the brethren. And Doug, I think one of the reasons that we saw disunity rise among the time of David O. McKay, first of all, is that he was in ill health for so long. I mean, he was president of the church from, I believe, 1951 until 1969. This is as memory serves. But for the last about 9 years, he was totally, he was a puppet prophet. And this is the problem with the medical innovations that are keeping prophets alive longer and longer. It keeps power vacuums. And even at one point in time, David O. McKay had 4 counselors to assist him because he was completely out of it. And that's where we started to see the infighting. It used to be that, Joseph F. Smith died of influenza, and Brigham Young, Joseph Smith, all of these guys died at a reasonable age. And so you couldn't have the disunity because the prophet was in control. But when you get people like David McKay and Joseph Fielding Smith, think how old he was when he took over as well. He only lasted a year. that's where you start to see the disunity. And just refresh my memory here for Sterling McMurrin here, Doug. He was excommunicated. I wasn't aware of that.
No, I don't think he was excommunicated.
Yeah.
David O. McKay prevented him from being excommunicated.
Right. That's what I thought. That's what I thought you said, is that he'd been excommunicated, but I wasn't familiar with that. Right. I never thought that he was.
They want multiple brethren wanted him to be excommunicated because he was he'd made public. I mean, he'd spoken at like conferences and things, and they were ready to pull their hair out. But David O. McKay forbade it. He said absolutely not. He was friends with him, and he knew that he was a good person inside. So he said no.
Okay. That's what I was tracking. I just wanted to make sure here. Liz in the chat here. Here's a question I'm curious about. If Nelson is the biggest reason for the emphasis on Jesus and being Christian, do you think it will continue under Oaks? And what I see from Oaks, and I'll put that to you next here. What do you see as the difference between Oaks administration and Nelson? What do you think are the biggest differences that we're going to see? Heaven forbid, let's just say that we woke up and found out that President Nelson, it was his time, and that President Oaks is going to be instated immediately. What would be the substantial changes that we would see immediately? And then what would the changes do you think would happen long term?
So hard to say. I don't know. President Oaks has not given away any real zingers in his behavior so far. He's pretty much towed the corporate line. There are some things that he seems to be pretty hung up on. The LGBTQ issues, anything surrounding that, he seems to be really involved with, and has been since he became an apostle. In 1984, he actually wrote a paper, and this has been leaked. He wrote kind of a position paper about gays and the church and what the church should do, and that has really become the playbook of the church ever since, as far as gay people go. And he kind of advocated for being nice to them, basically, in matters that didn't really have that much consequence, like don't try to prevent them from becoming school teachers or things like that. But when it came to things like employment or gay marriage, things like that, he advocated for sort of a nuclear option on that. But that seems to be one of the issues that he just comes to time and time again. So I think that it's anybody's guess as to what he would do. If he took the reins, would he clamp down even further on gay folks? I don't know. It's just hard to read him, but that seems to be a sticking point for him. Another really revealing thing is in some of the leaked videos of the meetings with the Quorum of the 12 that Mormon Leaks put out a few years ago. One of them, some of the brethren started talking about a person who may have been gay, and Oaks was like, were they gay? Were they gay? It seemed like they got off on that tangent and they couldn't get off of it. It's like, what difference did it make? I think it was Chelsea Manning or somebody like that.
It was. Yeah, it was Chelsea Manning.
Yeah. And it's like, are they gay? Are they gay? It's like, what difference does it make? But it was a big deal to them, So
right. And in those leaked videos, we knew that some of his biggest questions were in the quote unquote homosexual agenda. He really sees that homosexual persons have, and it really goes back to the proclamation on the family, that the fabric of our society will be ruined with the institution of the disintegration of the family, and with the lack of having. It goes back to what President Kimball said. President Kimball said that every family needs a mommy and every family needs a daddy. And that's what Oak sees it. And this is in that same vein as President Packer in those Mormon Leaks videos, and who was the acting president of the 12 until he died in 2015, who said that the church will never, ever change on these issues. And if you look at, what we need to look at on these gay issues really is we've got to always look at Bednar. because Bednar is going to be the guy that's going to shape the next generation in about 5 years. And what has David Bednar said about the homosexual issue? First of all, he made the incredibly ridiculous faux pas that there are no homosexual members of the church. Okay, but
Right.
he hasn't doubled down on that since. But the last time that he was asked about that, Doug, was go back to the National Press Club briefing in the late spring of 2022, and David Bednar was asked about the homosexual issue in the church. And what was his response? It's very instructive here. He said, not that we're praying about it, not that we have empathy about it, not that we're looking for a revelation, not that it would even have a revelation that would be necessary to make the change. He just said that homosexuality is not part of the plan. It's not that our hearts go out. There's no empathy here. There was no ability to, with the race and the priesthood ban, what we found out from Matt Harris is that their brethren were talking about this for a long time ahead of time, right? With the changing of the Black people getting temple privileges and getting the priesthood. But if we are to take David Bednar as the most important current apostle outside of Oaks and Nelson, it doesn't seem like the brethren are looking at this issue like they did the Blacks in the priesthood.
No. And that Mormon Leaks video also kind of demonstrated that same thing. There wasn't any discussion about, what can we do for gay people? It was just like, is that guy gay? It's like, so, there was a lot of sympathy there for gay people that I could see. So I think that, I think that is not going to change or maybe even get worse. I think that what I see from, maybe the legal side of things that Oaks would be keen to be up on and be a part of is the religious freedom pieces.
You bet. Yes.
And I think that Oaks will be willing to wield that $100 billion war chest that the church has built up to try to stomp on some of the what he might consider affronts to religious freedom, like steeple heights and things like that. I would not be surprised if he was president, if he took the McKinney, Texas piece all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States to try and get a carte blanche right for the church to do anything it wanted, anywhere it wanted. I think that that's ultimately what they want. They want 100% freedom. No one can stop them. No one can prevent them from doing anything that they want. And I think that's where they're going.
Yeah, in fact, the Mormonish podcast is going to be putting this out tomorrow here, Doug. Will Oaks take a RLUIPA lawsuit to the Supreme Court? They're talking about the McKinney Temple here, and this is a starring or I guess hosting here, Colby Reddish, talking about the proposed Fairview, Texas LDS Temple becoming a test case for RLUIPA in the higher courts, drawing on an excellent blog post by Lisa Toscano Downing, speaking of the September 6th, creator of Life Outside of the Book of Mormon blog. We explore Dallin H. Oaks' involvement in the precursor to RLUIPA and RLUIPA itself. So that's a good question. We'd certainly be looking forward to looking at that. Now, backing
that's fascinating that we're talking about it right now because I had not seen that announcement. So,
sure you had. Sure you hadn't, Doug.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said about, yes, I think his number one issue is going to be LGBTQ membership in the church. And I think number two, like you said, is going to be religious liberty. And if you go back to even 1974 here, this was that talk you were talking about here, or that paper, The Popular Myth of the Victimless Crime. So the idea behind this paper was, how does homosexuality, how is that criminal since there's no crime? We have consenting adults. So where is the crime? That's why he said that that's a myth. The popular myth of the victimless crime. That's what he said. First, I believe in retaining criminal penalties on sex crimes such as adultery, homosexuality, fornication, prostitutions, and other forms of deviant sexual behavior. And Doug, I've never seen him change his mind on that particular statement. I believe that, he was a Supreme Court justice from 1980 all the way up until he was called into the apostleship in 1984. And I haven't seen him change his mind on that once. If you go back to his young adult devotionals, which in my opinion are the most important addresses for the church every single year, is the young adult devotional. And his last young adult devotional, he had the legendary story of Amy, who was concerned about transgender issues at her school. And he talked a lot about the bemoaned the ages that Mormons are getting married later, that they're having less children. This is still his number one hobby horse, number one most important issue. And there's no doubt about that. Now, just real quick, I saw this posted out here by Culch today here. It says, you remember Jeff Holland and the infamous musket talk speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you remember that. Well, it looks Jeff Holland has finally come out and talked about that. It says, and this is what Culch tweeted out here. It looks like Jeff Holland is much more effective at leading people out of the Mormon church than I am. Culch 0, Holland countless. Because finally, after that controversial talk, apparently Holland has come out and made a statement on that. And this is what LDS Footnote says. He says that somehow Holland is the victim because according to this article, quote, this is what Jeff said. Now, if anybody was hurt, and I know some were in that exchange, that then I was hurt, and I have wept for those 3 years, talking about his famous musket fire talk. But if you look at what Matt Easton tweeted back, because this is all about Jeff versus Matt, I have lost count the number of people who have told me Holland's speech was the final straw for them leaving. He's not weeping for the pain he caused LGBTQ people. He's weeping over those decreasing membership numbers he exponentially accelerated. What's your reaction to that talk here? This is apparently, from my understanding, this is the first time that Jeff Holland has really reconciled his famous musket speech talk.
First of all, it's kind of a hollow for him to say that he was hurt and that he weeps all the time. I mean, if he was really sorry for it, then he would recant some of what he said and try to, make things better. But all he said is that, oh, I was hurt. Well, like Maddie said, that doesn't begin to, to heal those that are leaving and that have been hurt and devastated by what he did, including Maddie. I mean, Maddie got even worse treatment because Holland criticized his graduation speech. So that just falls on that just rings hollow. It rings hollow to me.
Yeah, it definitely does. Now, a badass peacemaker there, D-Base, do you have a real rivalry with Mormonism Live, or was that for giggles? I assume that he is speaking about my about my legendary fake interview over here with the guys over there at Mormonism Live. This is obviously a parody video that I did. The exclusive interview, Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel unveils shocking insights. And this is obviously just a joke interview here. Did I, Doug, I need you to be the reality check here. Did I go too far with this ridiculous and silly interview? Was this mean-spirited? Or what's your honest take on this? Did I go too far?
This was all in good fun, and they have good senses of humor. I loved all the creative editing that you did. I love it when people use their talents to come up with clever things. That's why I love what Culch does as well. It's so clever. It's amazing to me. And I loved it. And I know that, I told you that you might need a lawyer. But I loved it. I loved it. And I think most people do. So, including them.
Now, the first I pinned this just to put everybody's mind at ease. The first pinned comment here is by Radio Free Mormon himself, who said that it was brilliant and that he loved it. So, hey, look, it was just for kicks. Badass Peacemaker. It was just for jokes. It was just for fun. Look, and Doug, it used to be that I used to swear oaths to never speak evil of the Lord's anointed and to avoid loud laughter. And now that I don't really subscribe to that, I don't really have any prophets that I follow. And, I think poking fun at good people is good fun. And don't forget, I just want this to be very clear here, that they literally said in the episode that I parodied, they said that some people will be making clips out of this video. And I guess that's okay. So they knew what they were doing. And I just followed what their advice was. So this wasn't like it was done without their consent. They literally, this was a public video, for crying out loud. Okay. So let's go through a couple more of these. Oaks reminds me more of a McConkie Mormon who said things like so-called Christians. Yes. Obviously Dallin Oaks is much more of a Fielding Smith, much more of a Bruce R. McConkie. The lack of, Bruce R. McConkie's really, among his many calling cards, was a complete lack of empathy. I mean, he was a really, I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way. He was a very brutal person personally. And I don't see the empathy that comes from Dallin Oaks either. I don't think empathy is what anybody would absolutely describe him as. I mean, he was even tweeted out about those. Do you remember Christmas cards when he tweeted out about the Christmas cards that he received? Do you remember that one?
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, so he got, I don't know how many Christmas cards it was, but then he bemoaned that some of them didn't mention Jesus in the Christmas cards, and he was a little bit chagrined about this. This is somebody who gets greeting cards and then checks them for if they mention Jesus or not. So empathy is definitely not on his highest list. There's no doubt about that.
If you're one of the ones that didn't send him a Jesus card, it's bad optics. It's very bad optics. I think he's, like I said, he's tuned into the legalistic side of things because of his background, but also remember the era in which he was raised. I mean, this guy is in his 90s. He grew up when it was normal to hate gay people, bash people, for people to be prejudiced. And, it was much more widespread. The care and concern of the marginalized groups, it was almost a disdain. There's a famous movie about cops tracking down gay people. It showed them as being like pedophiles and things, and they're following this gay guy around, and they figure out that he's got some young guy trapped in his evil schemes, and they go and arrest this guy. I mean, it's just insane, this video, but that is what Oaks grew up in. And people, as we've seen, like from these exposés that Matt Harris did with blacks in the priesthood, and which Greg Prince did with David O. McKay's era, that these men carry their prejudices and their and their thinking patterns into the quorum. It's not shed miraculously, and they suddenly become these saintly, so totally benevolent people. It doesn't happen. They're still the same people. They just have a big title attached to them now. So
Gene, welcome to the program here, Lighter Daily Digest. Do you think the person who created the Facebook page, the potential oncoming disaster of a Dallin Oaks presidency, is on the radar? I don't know. I actually have checked out that particular Facebook page. I don't find it to be very valuable. I think it's just a lot of hate and fear mongering in there. I'm not a big fan of it myself. And welcome to the program, Other Sheep. It's about banding with other Christians over the Constitution right now. Yes. And that's what we also found out from the Mormon leaks, is that the church really likes to get into, they'll line up, if they can find anybody that they can line up with on an issue, that's where they'll form the coalition. So, the church is generally anti-abortion, so they'll line up with the Catholic Church on those particular issues. They'll line up with the evangelicals to fight against gay rights. They'll line up with anybody so long as it's going to carry the church's water. And so, that's definitely the way that it works there. Let's see here. Life After Belief. I see Oaks doubling down on two things: proclamation of the family and religious freedom, i.e. let us do anything tax-free. I agree with you. See, I think that the handbook change with regards to sneaking in the proclamation to the family into the handbook I think that is Oaks. So it used to be that, the proclamation of the family says that gender is eternal. Well, people can say, well, my sex and my gender are two different things. My sex is what I was born with, but my gender is how I identify. Well, just about a year ago, the church went back and changed it so that gender is what is assigned at birth. So for the church, gender and sex are the same thing, and they're immutable and they last forever. I see that as Oaks doing that, and that he would want to, when you enshrine the proclamation of the family into the handbook, it basically turns it into doctrine, because really the doctrine of the church comes from the handbook, because there's been no canonized revelations in over 100 years. So
totally. And I wouldn't be surprised if when Oaks ascends to the presidency, that one of the first things that he does is canonize the proclamation to the family. I think that's been sort of a motive previously that got thwarted a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it.
But Doug, see, this is why I don't think that I don't think it will happen, and I don't think it ever can happen, because in order for something to be canonized, it's supposed to go before the church. Is supposed to be ratified, even though the church hasn't done that before. It's supposed to be voted on by common consent. And if you were to vote on that in a general conference setting, you would get hundreds of people would say, I'm not in favor of it. Hundreds.
I don't know. The way they have basically tossed aside common consent, I would not be surprised to see them do it. I really wouldn't.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't.
Hey, Colby, welcome to the program. I just did watch your episode there with Steve Pinecker. I just finished it a few minutes ago. That was a nice discussion over there on the Mormon book reviews. For those of you out there, if you are not familiar with Steve Pinecker and the Mormon book reviews, I'm going to pull this right. I'm doing this on the fly here, but if you go over to Mormon Book Reviews, you will see the interview here that just happened with Colby Reddish, which was a really good interview. This is a great talk here. It just shows that, Steve says that he's a former atheist on the right here. I've had both of these guys on the Mormon News Roundup before. I think I've had Colby on twice. I had Steve on once. And Steve on the right there, he said that he was raised Christian. He lost his faith, became an atheist for approximately 10 years, I believe. And then he, gained his faith back. And on the left here is Colby Reddish, who we just did the Trent Horn review with. And they had a very civil conversation where one of them is a believer, one of them is not. This is a perfect example of the dialogue that can happen in the space that is respectful, even though nobody gave 1 centimeter of space. Have you had a chance to watch this, Doug?
Have not. No, haven't, but I will. I love what Colby does. He's awesome. And Steve as well. I really respect both of them. So
yeah, Steve is extremely knowledgeable. If you go back and watch, Steve had like a 5-part Mormon Stories episode. The knowledge that Steve has about Mormonism is extremely impressive, especially the branches of the Restoration that I am not as familiar with as he is. Right. He is very, very smart on those things. I mean, I can't keep them all straight, that's for sure, and he certainly can. Eric Red, welcome to the program. David A. Bednar, there are no poor in the church. This is a better solution than temples for fighting poverty. I agree. Eric has helped me do some of my debate prep with Jacob Hansen, and I just want to talk about that for a minute because I accepted the debate. But I've come to find out here that Jacob often challenges people to debates, and then he doesn't actually follow through. I assumed that he would. And I've been signaling it for a couple of weeks, and I released the video a week ago. Haven't heard one thing back from Jacob Hansen. And he called me a coward and said that I should go back to the kids' table, basically. And I answered the challenge, and the ball is in his court. I'm not going to return the favor and call him a coward, but he asked for a debate. I accepted it. I haven't heard from him. I don't know what other conclusion I'm supposed to draw from that, because he debates a lot of people. I've been told that he only debates with big wigs and people with big channels, which is probably not the Mormon News Roundup. But he's the one who challenged me. So if you're going to challenge somebody to a debate, they accept it, and then you don't follow through. I don't know what that says about him, but I always thought that Mormons are supposed to be covenant keepers, Doug.
Well, don't get your hopes up. Who knows? Those people are unpredictable, very unpredictable group.
Yeah, Life After Belief said that Holland made it about himself. Once again, I heard See How Much I Love Them. That's right. He is making it about himself. And Colby Reddish, not to mention, if he felt any regret, he would have the speech pulled from the this Holland's so-called musket fire talk is now required reading for a new BYU freshman course called Freshman Fundamentals or something like that. And it's part of that particular course, even though they've taken out some of the more weird parts of it. I have a lot of problems with that particular talk because especially what Colby said actually on this particular interview here that he did with Steve Pinecker, he talked about how Elder Holland, that according to Matt Easton, his talk was approved by the higher ups. You're a valedictorian. You have to get your speech pre-approved, and he stuck to the script. So therefore, what is the problem? This is a disconnect between the board of trustees and the people at the top and the more empathetic. I taught at BYU for a long time, Doug. The professors there are far more progressive than the board of trustees, than the first presidency, than the other people that they put at the top. And those people want to see a dogmatic, very hard line approach, but the professors, they love their students. And so I'm not surprised that this got approved from that level. And Elder Holland should have taken it up with whoever the dean was or the provost was who approved the talk and not take it up with Matt Easton himself. That was a serious faux pas, to put it mildly, on
as far as I see it. I agree. I do think, though, that the church schools are going to be, they're on the front line of the retrenchment effort. The talks that have been given, especially like this musket fire talk, there have been other talks given, trying to rein in, like you said, the more progressive professors, and making some of the requirements to be a professor sort of like uber loyalty to the church. They basically said the credentials aren't as important as their testimony is. And I think that that's a signal that they're going to be weeding out these people in the years to come, so that the school matches the orthodoxy and the fundamentalist mindset of the brethren. I think it's gonna. They've got to start teaching the kids early. That's sort of teach your children well. Remember that song? So
yeah, BYU is real. In my opinion, the BYUs are really where you will see the church is in its most regressive state. That's what we would see if the church had power over the rest of this world. They would try to inculcate a BYU-like society for the rest of us. So that's definitely where we can look. And having been taught at BYU over a number of years, I can tell you that it was back in the end of 2012 when there was a chill that was at the BYUs. In particular, faculty members were being let go from Brigham Young University in an opaque new office of the LDS Church is apparently calling the shots. A common thread is LGBTQ issues. So new faculty members were then, there was a couple of professors who were let go, even though, Doug, they had temple recommends and they had their ecclesiastical endorsements, which used to be the only requirement. Now there's a new office that they put in here, which I can't remember the name of the particular office, but basically what we saw, and again, this is referencing the musket fire talk. Basically what we've seen here is that, yeah, it really is. It's basically like thought police here, and they added additional questions of church loyalty, especially in regards to gay issues for those faculty members. And there's just absolutely no academic freedom whatsoever at the BYUs. It's an absolute tragedy. And you see that even I put together a video, it was last year, about who was the guy who was the jazz professor. All he wanted to do was play jazz. What was his name? Shoot, Matt. All he wants to do is play jazz. Okay, I've got to look that up here. It's in my own. Hold on. Okay, jazz.
That's okay. Look it up. This is a
live
show.
This is Ryan Nielsen. That's right. I put together this video last year of Ryan Nielsen. BYU disinvited this professor from speaking at a jazz festival because he merely aired his disbelief in the LDS Church. So he had taught there for a number of years. He was a believing member, and then he lost his faith. But he would still be able to go to the jazz festivals or give lectures or things like that. But we know that at the BYUs that the church will not allow ex-Mormons to have any participation in the church at all. You can be a non-believer. You can be an atheist. You have the BYU forums. You can be, you can worship all kinds of different things. But if you're an ex-Mormon, no, you're not going to have any fellowship on the Lord's University.
Yeah, and we saw the same kind of thing happen with David Archuleta. They largely erased David Archuleta from the church libraries, even though he's done concerts and things for the church. And you'll never hear his name mentioned again, is my prediction. He's out. He's gone.
Yeah, they yanked his books out, his songs and his books. I think he had a book as well, Out of Deseret book. And then all of the when he was featured a number of times with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, those were taken down. Now my understanding is that they were only unlisted, and that way they could be put back up. If he ever got his faith back, they could just bring him back. I don't know that for a certainty. Yeah,
of course.
Once you express, and David Archuleta, to my understanding, is still a member. I don't know if he's been through a membership council, but once you express the slightest disbelief in the church, then anything that you've done previously, you're dead to us. You're gone. It's not thanks so much for all of your efforts. It's your name will be erased out of existence. So let's look at a couple of these other comments here. Catherine says, I'm always frustrated with how the church doesn't acknowledge intersex folks in the doctrine. And that's the issue that I brought up when we did a review twice of Greg Mattson's. He talked about the new transgender policy updates. And for 2 hours, he rambled on and he never dealt with this elephant in the room, which is the biologically known fact to all of us, not a matter of opinion, not subject. This is a known biological fact. Okay. It's not some new woke conspiracy. It's not hyperfeminism running amok. What about intersex people? He never wants to deal with that. Okay. Well, if you're going to come up with a policy that doesn't deal with a segment of the population, what kind of a policy is that? You talk to the lawyers, you didn't work it out. Greg Mattson dropped the ball on that.
Yeah, and the intersex community is larger than people think. It really is, and this is barring the trans community. You have the intersex community, and then you have the trans community, which is a totally different thing. But the intersex community really has trouble, and people make decisions about intersex kids. Surgical decisions and things, the parents, and it's really kind of barbaric what they do to some of these kids to try to assign them a sex. And a lot of times it's not the sex that the kid is. It's the kid grows up and it's kind of like, I've got the wrong stuff down there, but the parents made the decision for them. So it's tragic what happens to these people, and it's not even on the radar, it seems, of the church. So,
well, since we've been talking so much about Dallin Oaks, I got a lot of videos out there that haven't been released out there. I have, believe it or not, I have over 100 videos that haven't been released, but I was waiting on this one until Dallin Oaks actually became the president. But this is the top 10 fails of Dallin Oaks here. So let's watch a little bit of this since we've been talking about him. Since we don't have any other callers out there, we'll let the cats out of the bag, which is apparently what I like to do on these live streams. But let's see what the top 10 fails are.
Call in.
News Roundup. I'm D-Bays, and that's Talent on loan from Kolob. And today we're diving into the top 10 failings of President Dallin H. Oaks, a senior leader in the Mormon Church and presumably the next president and prophet. Dallin Oaks has been a significant figure in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for many years, but his leadership has not been without controversy. From his involvement in controversial gay electroshock therapy while he was president at Brigham Young University, to his homophobic rhetoric and failure to engage with critical questions, we examine the issues that have marred his tenure. Let's explore some of the most significant issues that have arisen during his time as an apostle. Let's go.
This is my old theme song. I don't use it that much anymore.
It's cool. I like it. I want to start dancing to that.
First on our list is Oaks' failure to properly account for his involvement in gay electroshock treatments at BYU during his presidency in the 1970s. These controversial practices have been widely condemned, yet Oaks has not fully acknowledged or taken responsibility for his role in them, and he's made denials which have proved inaccurate at best.
The past has a way of coming back, especially when it's shrouded in controversy and unanswered questions. Let's take a journey to a time when a prominent figure, Dallin H. Oaks, was at the helm of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The church's history with its LGBTQ members has been fraught with tension, a tension that Oaks seems unwilling to fully acknowledge. Among the whispers of the past, there's a chilling echo of a deeply problematic practice, the alleged use of electroshock therapies on gay students at Brigham Young University. This controversial claim casts a shadow over Oaks's tenure at the university, yet he denies any knowledge of such therapies taking place. Despite the mounting pile of research contradicting his denial, Oaks remains silent on the issue. His refusal to discuss the past mistreatment of LGBTQ members is not just an avoidance of uncomfortable truths, but also a denial of the distress that many individuals experienced when religious beliefs were used to deny their rights. In the face of mounting evidence, the silence raises questions, and the questions demand answers. The story unfolds not in a straight line, but in a complexity of denials, contradictions, and evolving attitudes. We journey back to the tenure of President Dallin H. Oaks at Brigham Young University, a time marked by whispers and hushed conversations about the treatment of LGBTQ students. Despite Oaks's denial of any knowledge, research suggests otherwise, unearthing a buried truth: the existence of electroshock therapies. Imagine the distress, the pain of those who went through this, all under the guise of therapy. The stark contrast between Oaks' denial and the academic research draws a line in the sand, igniting a controversy that begs for resolution. But the narrative doesn't end there. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, under the weight of mounting evidence and societal shift, has since denounced these conversion therapies. A commendable step, yet one that raises questions about the past. Why were these practices endorsed in the first place? The shift in stance reflects an evolving attitude, a willingness to acknowledge the harm done. However, the lack of acknowledgement from Oaks himself adds another layer to the controversy. The church is moving forward, but without addressing the past, can it truly progress? As the church moves forward, the shadows of the past continue to cast long, dark lines. The future is a battleground where rights, beliefs, and freedoms clash and coexist. In the wake of President Dallin H. Oaks' remarks, a wave of skepticism has been ignited. His denial of knowledge about past conversion therapies during his tenure at Brigham Young University has stirred a pot of controversy that continues to bubble over. It raises questions, doubts, and a sense of unease. This controversy isn't just about the past. It's about the present and the future. It's about the ability of individuals like Oaks to confront past harms and engage in meaningful conversations about rights and freedoms. It's about the LGBTQ community's struggle for acceptance and equality. The debate is ongoing. It's a dance of perspectives, a tug of war between aspects of religious belief and the essential human rights of individuals. It's a dialogue that needs to be had.
I think we got the gist of it here. Doug, what do you think about this? Is one of his most. Can you move over just a little bit on your camera? What do you think about his electroshock therapy and the fact that he hasn't taken any responsibility for it whatsoever?
Yeah, it's disturbing. This is one of the things that Nemo pressed him on, and he basically said, well, he didn't really know about it, and put the blame, or he didn't take responsibility. He just pointed Nemo to some study that some of the fair people or farms people had done, and they said he wasn't to be blamed, and that was his reference, and then that was all. So there's no accountability there. I do want to make one quick comment that when you were playing that video, it showed Dallin Oaks in his office next to a picture on the wall. And that picture is a very interesting painting, and it's called Forgotten Man. And it's a guy down on his luck, hanging his head as he sits on the curb, and all the people are walking by him. Dallin Oaks said he hangs that picture in his office to be reminded of important things. And I just wonder if he ever has thought that that's how the LGBTQ people feel in the church. It's like that man, the forgotten man.
Yeah, and what we hear from people like Dallin Oaks and Jacob Hansen, they say that true charity means that we don't make excuses, that true charity for others, when you actually are kind to others, according to them, is to teach, quote unquote, true doctrine to them. And that if we don't tell them the truth, then we're actually not having charity. That's, I think, how Dallin Oaks really approaches that. Now, actually, if you caught our last episode there over on the Mormonish podcast here, which we did a little while ago, the top 50 cringe moments. Did you manage to catch that one there, Doug? Our top 50 most cringe moments?
I thought it was an excellent podcast. I liked it.
Yeah, it was a good podcast there. Whose thumbnail? I need your honest opinion. Here's Mormonish's thumbnail here on the right. There it is with me in my party hat. Or my thumbnail, right. Top 50 most cringe movie. Which one is better? Theirs or mine? Oh, I need to know.
Yours is better. Yours is better. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And we talked about this electroshock therapy, and Landon actually brought up something that I was not aware of at all about Oaks's controversial denial here of the gay conversion therapy. This was in University of Virginia, my neck of the woods, November 2021, where he denied that electroshock therapy took on at BYU. But Landon points out something very interesting that I wasn't aware of, and we'll see if you are aware of it, Doug, but it's very interesting here. Let's hear Dallin Oaks talk about this conversion therapy here.
It discontinued earlier, and it never went on under my administration.
Well, wait a minute. He's saying that electric shock therapy didn't occur at BYU during his administration, where certain gay students were hooked up to electrodes and shocked. But it seems like that's been fact-checked. Can you help us out on that one, Landon?
Not just gay people were shocked, straight people were electroshocked. Mormonish has an episode coming up. We have talked to a man who went through this electroshock therapy while at BYU, being a straight man simply because his bishop suspected he was gay and asked him to go to this, encouraged greatly from the university to go and through this therapy. So this is an episode coming up. You're going to be shocked when you see it.
That's maybe not the best use of the word shocked there that Landon was saying about you'd be shocked to see this episode. But I wasn't aware of that, Doug. I don't know if you were. You're the OG of Nashville Mormonism, but I wasn't aware that there was straight students also that were hooked up there.
Neither was I. I wouldn't be surprised though. A couple of things about that whole episode though. You know, there was an effort by the church. Okay, so what happened? This is some history that I read that I found fascinating. Hang on just a second. I've got to turn my lights back on here. I have there. That's better. Yeah, I have lights that turn on and off automatically at certain times of the night. Anyway, there's some history that a lot of people are not aware of about the church as it relates to gay people. So there was a student who became very disgruntled with what was being taught in the psychology department about gay people because he was gay himself. And I can't remember the student's name. I'm sorry. I can't remember. But anyway, he wrote this scathing letter to his professor about how the teachings about that, you know, gay people chose to be gay and, you know, it was caused by masturbation or whatever the going sentiment was, which was all erroneous what they were teaching at that time. You know, the church has never, in its history, it's never gotten it right about gays. It hasn't. It's always been behind. It's always taught the wrong thing. And during that time, it was teaching all this erroneous stuff that medical science was beginning to say, whoa, this is not right. And gay people were like, yeah, this is what we've been trying to tell you the whole time. So anyway, this guy wrote this scathing letter, and it was called the Payne Papers, Payne, the Payne Papers, because I think that's the professor he sent it to. Was his last name was Payne. Anyway, this went out not only to his professor, but he had a friend who worked in the mailroom at the church office building or something like that, and he had copies of this delivered not only to this professor, but to the president of all the universities, church universities, and to all of the general authorities of the church. And it also wound up making it into the newspapers as well. But this guy just ripped that professor completely apart. So the church was quite annoyed, especially the fact that they had all been bombarded. Yeah, there you go. They had all been bombarded. Yeah, Reed Payne, that's it. Chloe Jenkins, that's the student's name, yeah. So anyway, this caused a big kerfluffle, and the church decided that they were going to mount an attack, you know, a counterattack about this. And they assigned people to do it. They failed. The rebuttal was rejected. It was too weak and everything. And eventually it fell on Boyd K. Packer, who gave his infamous speech about where he talked about homosexuality without trying to say homosexuality. I think once in his talk, about homosexuality. He actually mentioned it, the word, he kept using all these other illusory references to it. But anyway, he basically said it was a disease, okay, in his talk. That's one of his famous negative talks about gay people. Anyway, the church also at that point in time, they created what they called the Values Institute. And the Values Institute, and this is under Dallin Oaks's auspices, okay? This is while he was president. The Values Institute, what they were tasked to do was to defend the church against gays, okay? They were going to prepare materials, Institute for Studies in Values and Human Behavior. Yeah. Alan Bergen, Victor Brown, etc. And they were going to create materials that leaders and members could take to their local legislatures and, fight against gay stuff. But they were also going to take the psychologists, Dr. Brown and Dr. Bergen, and they were going to write this big book and set the record straight on homosexuality and prove that it wasn't what the other psychologists were saying. Well, that whole thing just was a complete giant flop. Okay.
I'll bet.
But here's the interesting thing. I believe it was Dr. Bergen, one of his sons was gay. And after he passed away, all of his papers came into his possession, including all these papers about the Values Institute, the Payne papers, responding to all this stuff. And a lot of it had a lot of letters in there signed by Dallin Oaks, going back and forth, talking about this, talking about the book, talking about when they pulled the funding for the book. That was your tithing dollars, by the way. They were going to try to make it seem like it wasn't a church book. They were going to go to like Oxford Press or something, and have it all kind of done outside the church, so it didn't seem like the church had backed it. But anyway, it failed anyway. So this is something, of course, the church doesn't talk about because it makes them look bad. But that's a little sort of little known history about this whole scenario. So it wasn't just electroshock therapy. There were multiple things going on at BYU under Dallin Oaks's auspices relating to this subject, and he was involved in that. And we have the receipts, so to speak. We have those letters. In fact, that's part of the evidence that Nemo sent to Dallin Oaks, saying you did know about this. You were aware.
Interesting. I was not aware of that Values Institute. Obviously, if it was started in 1976, that was during Dallin Oaks' tenure, which was approximately it was started in 1976. Dallin Oaks' tenure is like 1971 to 1980, give or take a year. Let's go. Let's keep on going here. Top 10 fails of Dallin H. Oaks as a religious leader. Let's come up with, that was number 10. Let's keep going because there's a lot of subject matter here.
Yeah.
You fail.
Next up, we have Oaks' involvement in the church's $5 million fine by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for failing to properly disclose its investments. As a senior leader, Oaks shares responsibility for the church's financial practices. This scandal has damaged the church's reputation and raises serious questions about transparency and ethics under his leadership.
Big news in the LDS church world today. It looks like the church finally got caught with its hand in the cookie jar. The Securities and at work. Good job.
Arrest that man.
Arrest that man. Speaking of, every time the tithing dollars at work, technically, I guess the SEC fine supposedly wasn't paid with tithing dollars, but how big on the list here of Dallin Oaks' failures is the his involvement with the SEC fine? How far up does that rise in your estimation?
Well, I think it's close to the top, for not just for him, but for all of the brethren that knew about it. And we know that it was at least the first presidency and the presiding bishopric. All of them knew. You would think that Dallin Oaks, being a judge and a lawyer, would have had alarm bells going off in his head over this scheme, but evidently it was something that they felt like they could buck the entire U.S. government over. And we've seen this in the past, that the church seems to feel like it's above the law. The attitude of some of the, hang on, I've got a little cat here that needs to be picked up. This is Kira. This is Kira, my cat. You know, she's wanting me to go to bed. She's wanting me to go to bed.
I have no problem, Doug, with you owning a cat. Just the single cat ladies out there I've got problems with. But if a guy owns a cat, it's no big deal.
Exactly. But yeah, I think they're all culpable. And as Dallin Oaks, especially, you would think it would have raised alarm bells with him. But we saw in subsequent videos when they had members of the presiding bishopric being interviewed, that they were actually kind of haughty and dismissive, and they say, well, we don't think that applies to us. We didn't tell the truth because we didn't basically think that applied to us. Well, that's a pretty arrogant attitude to have. It was very plain. The fact that they went through such pains to do it, to kind of do this deception, tells you that they knew that what they were doing wasn't kosher, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, speaking specifically, you're talking specifically about those 990 forms about the block on how many assets it is that you're managing, where the church.
Yeah, they said 1 million.
Yeah, they said 1 million when it was really somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40 billion. And they said that honesty doesn't apply to us because it really goes back to basically kind of like a divine command theory or a prophetic command theory. What is moral is whatever comes out of the current prophet's mouth. That's what you're supposed to follow, and therefore anything else is irrelevant. And that leads to incredibly harmful behavior. Now, we don't have time to watch this entire video here, but I'm just going to show you the last two of the failings here because we don't have enough time. But I did one of my famous redubbings, or I guess I put in the subtitles on Dallin Oaks' talk here coming up on his famous talk about supposedly Amy, who writes him a letter about transgender kids at her school. This is a very, hopefully an amusing take here where I redo his address. Hopefully you'll appreciate this. Here we go.
Fail! Oaks has made several controversial statements about gender roles, advocating for traditional patriarchal structures within the family and the church. These teachings have been criticized for perpetuating inequality and limiting the potential and contributions of women in the church.
I just received a valuable letter from a 16-year-old girl who lives in a state where we have few members. I will call her Amy. Her letter is important because she expresses feelings that are common in young people all across the church. Amy's lengthy letter includes these portions. I've asked one of your peers to read her words.
Wait a minute. Church headquarters made a slick video out of this fake letter. Speaking of your tithing dollars of work here, Doug.
I feel like I sometimes get inconsistent and confusing messages from the church.
You mean like about the Adam God doctrine? Oh, maybe that's probably not what we're going to talk about. Okay, not Adam God. I got it. There can be confusing messages. I get it.
And confusing messages from the church. In my day-to-day life, I see members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on social media act as...
Yeah, way to use the full name of the church, Amy. There's no way she's going to write in a letter about the Mormon church. I shouldn't interrupt this so much, but...
my day-to-day life, I see members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on social media act as if they aren't part of this gospel. I feel like I'm the only young woman in my ward who sees the things I see wrong with the world.
Probably because you're a sanctimonious prick. I'm just guessing here.
I truly don't understand why so many youth in our church don't see any problem with people changing their gender every other day.
People changing their gender every other day. What? Where does she live? Where in the world does Amy live? I've never heard of anything like that. That's absurd. Never seen that before.
Dating people who are the same sex or identify as no gender. At ward or stake youth activities, I am asked my pronouns. Or at school, I am asked to dance with a girl who thinks she is a boy.
Yeah, Amy is a bigot in training. I suggest we give her a medallion. What do you think, Doug?
Oh, gosh.
I know we are supposed to love everyone and show them respect, and I always do. I just feel that there is a line being crossed.
Yeah, this is such an authentic letter. It just hits every single one of Dallin Oaks' pet little peeves. Very authentic here. I wonder why they won't show her face. Can't imagine why.
I wish we heard more talk from church leaders about this problem.
What? More talks about the LGBTQ community? Does she not watch General Conference? Every single one of Dallin Oaks' talks spews hate on this subject. Does she not watch General Conference, Doug? Give me a break.
This is a letter from a young woman who is about the age of the high school seniors in this audience. Why does her letter strike me so profoundly? She wants to do what is right, but she feels surrounded by values and behaviors she feels to be wrong, and she just doesn't know what to do about it. She wants to stand for truth, but she doesn't know how to do it with love.
It's all fake news.
Fake news.
Well, what do you think of the legend of Amy this is the young adult devotional from 2 years ago? Just happens to write a letter here. The coincidence is remarkable. It hits every single one of Dallin Oaks' most important issues. What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. Yeah, who knows if it's real or not? Nobody can say. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That she says they keep changing gender every other day. Give me a break. I mean, let's talk about real gender change. Gender change occurs naturally in nature. There are fish and amphibians that can change sex. That really does happen. Are the spirits of those fish? Do the spirits change? Do they change sex? If his sex is eternal?
Those are questions that are above my pay grade. Doug, before we let you go here, we'll get to some of this other stuff later. I've got a bunch of unlisted videos since you're the only one who came on. I'll give you a choice of watching one of these videos here. We have a couple of good ones here. Let me pull up 4 for you to choose from, and then we'll take us out on these 4. Here we go. Here's number 1 here. Is Jonah Barnes okay? This is Jonah Barnes' unhinged rant on Word Radio, maligning Nemo the Mormon. Or do you want number 2? Shirtless LDS live streams, Jonah Barnes gets pulled over by cops and Word Radio's wild wardrobe. Okay, wait a minute. Do I have cops in both? No. Okay, there's 2 different ones here. Or do you want the City Creek Mall controversy, that time when Jesus bought a mall? That's option number 3. I think Jesus looks pretty good with that mall shopping bag there. Or we actually have number 4. There was a lot of controversy recently about the Mormon Church buying a $300 million farm down there in Queensland. I guess that's close to your neck of the woods, by the way, Peter. But I got into some arguments with some crazy guys over these Mormon farms. You got 4 choices. Once again, Jonah Barnes going off on Nemo, Jonah Barnes getting pulled over by the cops, and shirtless Word Radio live streams. We have the Jesus buying a mall, or we have arguing with crazies over farms. Which one of these do you want to see?
Well, since Nemo is on everybody's mind, let's do the Nemo one.
Okay. Jonah Barnes' unhinged rant on Word Radio, maligning Nemo the Mormon. Okay, let's check in with Jonah Barnes here. I do like this thumbnail quite a bit here. That's a pretty decent thumbnail as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
That's a pretty decent. And look, I got to also weigh in. If you look at these hats here, look, War in Heaven veteran. Doug, come on.
That's the most ridiculous trash. Oh my gosh.
See, look, I mean, everybody has the First Amendment of the Constitution, and you're allowed legally to wear hats like that. You know, the Stolen Valor Act, which was passed, I believe, under the second George Bush, said that it was illegal to impersonate a veteran if you're not a veteran. Well, that was struck down because, I mean, the great thing about the United States of America is that you can pretend to be Spider-Man, you can pretend to be a veteran, and you can pretend to be a prophet, seer, and revelator, and all of those things are perfectly legal. There's nothing illegal about those. But the question is if you're in a location and people don't really understand the war in heaven part, and they kind of think that you're a veteran, that seems awfully strange to me. What do you think, Doug?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor taste.
Yeah, that doesn't seem really good. Okay, so here we go. Is Jonah Barnes okay? Let's check out this video. This is going to take us out of here.
All my life I've barely spoken. Not these guys again. Your words have been so broken. And I've been under your hypnosis.
No, thanks.
Jonah Barnes, the Associate Professor of All Things Apocryphal. Thanks for joining us.
Jonah?
Yeah, I'm here, Carton. I'm here, and I'm fired up. I'm driving to Oxford right now. Gonna put the smack down on Nemo the Virgin, because y'all can't do it. Y'all are pulling your punches and trying to be nice to Nemo the Virgin here, and it's making me kind of sick.
Makes me sick.
I tuned in for some napalm from y'all, and I'm getting pussyfooting around. Okay,
Jonah.
Jonah.
Y'all, and it's making me angry. Okay, it's pathetic that this is the worst enemy of the church. This little dweeb. Let go, dweeb. I'm putting out a call to all anti-Mormons out there. We need better enemies. Okay, you want to talk about anti-Mormon stuff? Talk about how Wilford Woodruff was kind of a crazy guy. Kind of crazy. We can all agree on that.
Calm down.
Or the no beards in the temple rule. This is a stupid rule.
Huh?
We should all be in agreement on this. But no, you come at us with like this kitchen sink, like shrimp gumbo thing. It's like, hey, what's it like being a member? You start talking about 1970s electroshock therapy. It's pathetic.
You are pathetic.
This is our enemy. We need better antis. We go all over the world feeding people and like helping people. We decrease suicidality in LGBT people, and these are the enemies that we earn? Come on, you can do better.
Okay, stop talking. Stop talking.
Kara Burrell is just not quite pretty enough. Zelf on the Shelf, just not quite funny enough. And this bro, this Nemo the Virgin, not doing it for me.
Not really doing it for me.
We need better enemies. So call your friends, call your wives, call your husbands, and get some better enemies for the church out here, because it's getting boring debunking the same old garbage all the time. Jonah out.
What was that?
What was that? This is gonna be the best day ever.
What do you think there, Doug? What do you think?
Oh, that was good. That was good. The guy is so off the rails, and I don't get the Nemo the Virgin thing because he's married. So, I mean, do they not know that? I guess not. You know, and that guy, you know, needs like psychological counseling for sure. I'm not sure he should be driving. You know, he might be a menace to society behind the wheel.
Yeah, this is I don't know what Jonah's thinking on this one. I think honestly he might be doing a little bit of tongue in cheek here. I don't know how seriously he's taking himself, but I mean, come on, man. This is just too far out there. Jonah, you can do better than this, Jonah. I know you can.
This little dweeb? Let go, dweeb.
Yeah.
I'm putting
Pretty pathetic.
all anti-Mormons out there. We need better enemies. Okay? You want to talk about anti-Mormons?
You know, he wants us to talk about Wilford Woodruff. Why in the world would anybody want to talk about Wilford Woodruff? That's completely irrelevant, buddy.
Or the no beards in the temple.
Don't get it.
Yeah, okay. Well, hey, another episode of Real Talk Mormonism in the books. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Doug, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys out there soon.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, thanks.